or maybe the week before, some of the comments from Scottish First Minister Hamza Yousaf and his interaction, or his now pushing out the critical race theory, talking about Scottish institutions being very white. And he's very, very forthright and blunt with it. Our own Manchurian candidate, Varadkar here, started talking about it mealy. Now, it came to the fore here in Ireland, his speech, but his speech was by his mention of the overabundance of white people in a majority white country and their hallowed halls of institutions was back 2 years ago. So he was already ahead of the curve and trying to drop this out, this anti-white or this white privilege. Ben Scanlon from Grip Media also challenged the Health Minister Norma Foley on their inclusion in the new sexual education and the rollout about white privilege, teaching the children of white privilege. Now, you've been heavily involved in the Scottish front over there and pushing back. I have your posts up here if you want me to bring them up for people's attention as you're bringing us through the story. But tell us about your foray into the Scottish education system.
Yeah, well, it's not just me. There's another guy. There's a YouTuber called Resisting the Lies. He's done an awful lot of work, which I have to give him credit for alerting me to the danger of what was going on in Scotland. But basically, I came across two documents which I sent you today. One was produced by the Scottish Council of Deans of Education, and the other one was produced by the University of West of Scotland. And they were both quite concerning further, I thought, because they single out whiteness in both of them. That's the one from the Scottish Council of Deans. They single out, basically, the idea of whiteness, as whiteness being problematic. In that one you've got up, I'll just quote from a couple of the pages here. This is from page... the data points to structural barriers at every step, with black and minority ethnic communities, students less likely to qualify and less likely to secure employment than white peers. Initial teacher education, which this document was based, that was the reason for it. Institutions can play a key role in addressing these alarming trends in recruitment and retention of black and ethnic minority students. So straight away, I thought there's something wrong with that, because I've got a document here from, where is it? It is from the UK government document, the Education Committee's report, how white working class pupils have been let down and how to change it. Nowhere in this anti-racism document did it highlight how white boys and girls are doing really badly in schools. Nowhere near. And and it goes on, this document, it goes on. It says there's a plethora of research showing how majority white and black and black and ethnic minority students have little appreciation of how their racialized identities may influence their interactions in classrooms. It's like the whole document's conjuring up this idea of a bogeyman of if you're a black and ethnic minority person, you're somehow going to be disadvantaged. And the author of this document, this Scottish Council of Deans of Education, is a woman called Dr. Khadija Mohammed, who's in the Department of Education at the University of West of Scotland. And she's written lots of articles. She's an advisor to the government. She's in lots of committees. And she wrote an article, and I'll just paraphrase what she wrote, but essentially she was talking about her experience as a teacher in education. And again, red flags came up. She was complaining that she was the only black and ethnic minority teacher in a Scottish school, which is not surprising. It's 97% white in Scotland. No. And she said she had to learn how to play white. And I don't buy that, because when I lived in London, I worked in Wembley, which is an extremely diverse area. And in several places, I was the only member of staff who was white. But I don't ever recall having to play black or brown or anything. And I don't even remember my colleagues who, for most part, I got on very well with, and a good working relationship. I never had to sort of play African or Middle Eastern or anything like that. So this. So, anyways, there was that article, and there was another one produced by the University of Western Scotland as well. And in that, it was terrible. There was a terrible graph. I don't know which page it's on. It's 1, 2. It's a table called "White Supremacy to White Allyship." That's the one.
I have it here. Yeah.
It's basically a diagnostic system to notice how being white is problematic. So, white allyship. If you're a good white ally, for example, the onus is on white people to build sustained partnerships with black people. How condescending it is that to people who are black. How condescending is that infantilism of these people? Onus is on white people. I mean, black people can have social interactions. Brown people can have social relationships. They can be great members of a team, etc. Where is this coming from? And it said this is a white awareness. Onus is on white people to overcome unconscious bias.
Yeah,
well, that's pseudoscience, because way back 20 odd years ago, when I was doing my PhD, I was researching unconscious bias, and now in these computer tasks that they were used to measure unconscious bias, they were being used. One of them was called the implicit association test. You can use them for lots of different things, but essentially they were trying to use it for racism. But it was debunked years ago, because they said, well, what is unconscious bias? If you associate positive attributes to black people and you're a black person, well, that doesn't mean black people hate white people. It just means that they have a kind of bias towards their in-group. Having an in-group is not a negative thing. It's a very positive, adaptive thing. You know, if you live
I've always said over our times, this replacement or this inclusion of racism, which is again another critical race theory or critical theorists' construction of a word, whatever. We innately have, as I've always said, preferences and biases. We have a preference to be amongst our own, our people, or things that are familiar with us, and we have a bias towards other things. And that's where they kind of reframed it towards as in racism. But as you said, these are inculcated in us as human beings. We have a preference. They're to help us to adapt to the natural environment for some part of survival skills, I would imagine, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? You'd have a preference to eat a certain type of food, and you'd know the area, you'd maintain your border enforcement and stuff like that, and you'd have a bias to be among people or things of a like mind that you could affiliate with and trust. Sorry, Bruce, to cut across you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not like you can't say it's pathological just because someone like a Middle Eastern person has a bias towards Middle Eastern culture, Middle Eastern people, Middle Eastern traditions. I mean, that's ridiculous. But this table, I'll give one more example, and then I'll describe the complaint process. This is white indifference. You're basically suffering from white indifference if whiteness is denied. So it functions in an absent, invisible, mystical norm, leaving white privilege intact. I mean, this is just pseudoscientific, mystical nonsense. They are wanting to implant into teacher education, and of course put it out into the university teaching, in the high school teaching, primary school teaching, the ideology.
It'll seep its way down. Go ahead. Yeah, the ideology is to seep its way down to the younger youth, so that it does become inculcated, and they won't have any other day. They'll grow up with the premise that they are born as colonizers or they are born oppressors, and they can never remove that besmirch if they've grown up with it because of the color of their skin.
Yeah, but I think although it's you can look at it how it's not very good for white little kids in the school. This has got to be terrible for kids who are of a different ethnic origin, because it's got to turn them into victims. You know, so this has got to be bad for them too. It's abusive to them too. We shouldn't forget that. But anyways, I wrote to the University of Western Scotland to ask inquire about these two documents, and so I put an official complaint in, and it was not upheld, but I basically said that the both documents, do not follow the Equality Act 2010, because it's singling out one ethnicity, whiteness, as being problematic, pathological. And I wrote to them official complaint, but they didn't address the 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 one the University of Westminster, University of Western Scotland document. They only addressed the Scottish Council of Deans one, and basically said I get in touch with them. Well, I did get in touch with the Scottish Council of Deans, and they wrote back and said we don't think it's racist. That was it.
That was it.
But that was it. But the Scottish Council of Deans of Education, who commissioned one of the documents, they are not a public body. They haven't got. You can't do freedom of information requests to them. But they commissioned this document. The other document was a university.
Are they an NGO, or they're just not? They're not a public body, so they're not held accountable or scrutiny, is what I'm getting. Yeah.
Well, I've done the freedom of information request to the Scottish government, and they're not. The Scottish government, they said that it's not a public body, and they don't receive direct funding from the Scottish government. But the universities who are signed up to the Scottish Council of Deans, they get funding from the Scottish government, and but they did admit in the freedom of information request that the Scottish Council of Deans of Education had overarching governance of funding for certain things that came from the Scottish government, and asked the Scottish government who's responsible for these documents, which I think are racist. And they said, well, the universities, the authors who wrote them, and the Scottish Council of Deans. So, but as I said, I wrote to the Scottish Council of Deans, and I put an official complaint at the university, and the university got back to me and said, well, you should write to the Scottish Council of Deans. Well, they're not a public body. So they didn't, and they said, please stop writing to us about this matter. So they were avoiding accountability. And they
didn't want to answer any questions, and it basically asked you to stop communicating with them, because you're basically uncovering the narrative, or you're peeling back the lies. And I know in one of our earlier conversations as well, you did make mention that Hamzas has also facilitated some of these NGOs, or push funding in their direction, and this is where led you into doing this kind of freedom of information requests, to see who's actually responsible for the money that's being distributed about. And then you're getting some of the replies now, sheer blanket face off, but we don't think it's racist. And again, there's no remit, or there's no recourse for you to carry on. Back to you, Bruce, is there?
Well, yeah. Well, I inquired where the funding comes from. The funding comes from the Scottish government, from the education budget, because the Scottish Funding Council is one of the funding bodies that funds these programmed anti-racist campaigns in Scotland, and it comes from the Scottish government. They are funding it. It's a vicious circle. So you've got the Scottish Council of Deans of Education, with most of the universities signed up for it, they're not a public body. You can't do freedom of information requests to them. I don't think they've got a proper complaints process anyways. But they kind of handle all the people in universities, like Khadija Mohammed at the University of Western Scotland. They commissioned one of the documents there, as I say. Khadija Mohammed was from the University of Western Scotland. So I asked the University of Western Scotland, surely, as she's a staff member, she's accountable to her words in that document. Mm-hmm. They turned around and said, oh, she never wrote it in her role as a member of staff at the university. So, well, but the Scottish government are funding through all these different Scottish Funding Council and through the universities these programs. It's like a rabbit hole. You go down and very Kafkaesque. You can't find the culprit. But essentially, it does, I believe. Oh, yeah, that was another thing. That was another thing. I said to the University of Western Scotland, "Do you uphold the Equality Act 2010?" They said, "We comply with it, but they don't know if they breach it." So I said to them, "Well, how do you know? How do you know you comply with it if you don't know you're breaching it?"
Yeah.
There's no logic in the institution. Uh, and essentially, the communication, I'll be blunt, the communication I had with the university, they were evasive, they've been dismissive. I mean, I was saying I think there's racism here, anti-white racism, and the disdain in the emails, the replies, I think they must just want rid of me. But
I just,
this is
just sorry, Bruce, just want to throw at you there. Mel, one of our intrepid ex-councillors and staunch researchers over here, she says, belong to, you'd be familiar with them in Irish here, they just got 1 million to bring this into training educators in Ireland. Where that money came from, but Mel dropping that information out there for us as well. Back to you, Bruce, sorry.
Yeah, well, essentially, the education budget in Scotland comes from, I presume, a portion of it at least will come from taxpayers. So essentially, taxpayers, voters, are funding this anti-white racist propaganda, and being run in the background by non-public bodies called the Scottish Council of Deans of Education, who are full of activists, to go into our schools in Scotland and tell children who are white they've got some sort of pathology because they're white, and no one wants to be held accountable for it. That is the situation.
And Cathy says that there's no avenue for complaining. It's like, as you say, it's a vicious circle. One place is just going to keep pawning off responsibility to the next. Ultimately, it should be back in the government because they are providing funding for it. So who is controlling public monies? There has to be some accountability for the spending of public monies, and there has to be someone who is culpable for that as well, culpable for any breaches. I mean, taxpayers are now funding. Scottish taxpayers, in the majority, still majority white, are paying to educate their children to believe that they've got as you said, a pathology which is based on an immutable characteristic that they cannot control, which, i.e., the colour of the skin that they're born with. But it's being educated that they're the beneficiaries of previous colonialism and oppression, and that they can never remove that, they can never atone for it, anything. That's just the way it is, and that you have to facilitate and give largest benefit to people of colour, no matter what colour the skin is. You've got to be last in the queue. I mean, it's abhorrent in its first sense. It's stupid and retarded in another sense, and it's downright malevolent and evil.
Yeah, and as I said before, it's also infantilizes children of black and ethnic minorities as well. It's making them into victims. They are a recipient of this poisonous ideology. I mean,
this soft bigotry of low expectation. That's it. I mean, Douglas Murray's the sort of thing. This the soft bigotry, low expectation. It's often said, but it's our bigotries that we assume that they cannot sort themselves out with a passport or identification. They cannot access computers. So we have to lower the standard down, like what's newly creeping in the United States in some of the classrooms there, where they're completely foregoing teaching mathematics, saying that mathematics is racist and based on white privilege and all that. I mean, it's the construction of a retarded consumer population that will have no understanding of itself, its origin, or its previous histories. It'll be a blend of, I keep saying it, mocha-coloured colours, and it'll primarily, as you say, create people that are with a different skin tone colour to make them perpetual victims, and then on the other flip side of that, people born whiteness to be the perpetual oppressors in any situation. And again, there are plenty of people on the other side that use that victimhood. We've got them here. You've got them in Scotland. They're actually in Paris, and not only in education, they're on television, and they grift off that the malleability of the public to be led by the nose through sheer emotion, because their peers tell them, well, you can't go against the grain because you wouldn't want to be racist, would you? You wouldn't want to be seen as one of them or a far right. So the peer pressure around it as well sort of motivates it. And then, as with the pandemic and as with any machinations that the regimes want to participate, they wait for the economic of business. Surely there's going to be a cash flow bonanza for people, or the economy of businesses, when the general public latch onto something like the masks, like the injections, and then when there's money to be made on it, that's when it gets ingrained. Freedom of information request, you're pushing back. Towards the end of it though, Bruce, please give us some of the key strategy points that some of our educators that will be tuning into this, Hardy Bees, will be dispersing this sort of information, some tactics and strategies and key points to be aware of when you're finished your piece there as well. Bruce, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I mean, as an on the ground practical sort of, if you've got a child in the school and you've got a teacher or some sort of one of these activists coming into the school to tell you that because you're quite there's some sort of problem going on, you confront that person. You say to them, "You stay away from my child, and do not repeat that kind of nonsense to my child again, and or report them to the authorities, or report the school to the authorities. Make a fuss about." Parents have got to make a fuss about this. This is, on a grander scale, on the macro sort of level, this is just a symptom of the globalism. The Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin, who his daughter was allegedly murdered by Ukrainian special services, as people might recall, but
I remember, yeah.
he talks about this globalism in terms of you look at the mass immigration. And what's happening in Europe and the West, tradition, cultures, families, family life, etc., traditional family structures, etc., are being deconstructed all over the place. But also, because of the mass immigration, people are being displaced artificially on a huge scale. This plays into a homogenous world. And when you have a drive to homogeny like globalism, essentially it is fascism. What we're seeing is fascism, the homogenization of society in such a way to deprive people of their roots, deprive people of the culture, the family structures. It is you have to realize for what it is. And these Punch and Judy shows of what's going on in the world at the moment, every other issue is like it's a binary decision. Well, it might be that, but I think it's a deliberate ploy to distract us from what is actually going on. I mean, sure, there's things one can disagree with. There's issues that like COVID. It's quite you don't want to have mandates, etc., etc. But these globalist ploys, that there's so many fronts to what they're playing.
So that's what I'm saying. Is there's
coming for the children is as well. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, when they come from the children, people flinch and give in, and this is where one shouldn't give in.
I think as you say, your strategy is to make a fuss and a nuisance at the teacher, and then bring it forward and push back with the other concerned parents as well and stuff like that. It genuinely is. You're not going to get help from outside sources. You, the parent, have to enforce your child's education over them. Now, I know over here there's a Brandov is a young secondary school teenager who recently spoke out at the Let Women Speak protest or rally here in Ireland, and she's on X at the moment there as well. Now, most of the main actors in 10i and belong to and the Irish education system categorise her as a false account or a spreader of misinformation, but as a genuine, like I've seen the young lady when she was speaking at the event and stuff as well, but she is on point at all times. She has to go through the education system as it's evolving now and changing, and she's one of a small number of voices that are pushing back. And what she kind of tells in her posts on X and stuff like that is that other girls and other students are not going to school now. They're they're not going to school or avoiding classes that are bringing this forward so as not to be confrontational now. So they're depriving themselves, or they're affecting their education chances because they feel adverse as teenagers to go into the classroom, to be heckled again by peers in the classroom, but then to be castigated or marked down or seen as a troublemaker by the teacher, who will have been inculcated now with the Marxist dogma and the pushing it out, and will gleefully be pushing it out. And again, the fact that she is white and all of that will only lend credence. They'll use that manipulation while you're pushing back on it. You're using your oppressors. You're using your privileged status. And again, it's going to create, as you say, on one end, a victimhood. And again, it's good to be empathic for the other side again, but I would rather lift up and raise our side as well. But there's a strong chance of that creating black supremacists or people of supremacy, because if there's no accountability to them, if they're not held by law, as you can see, any transgression now by migrants, whether it be rapes, whether it be murders, what's going on, there'll be the media are misframing it, not by first not identifying the characteristics, whether they're foreign, what their names are, where they wear, they're immediately categorized as an Irishman or a Tralee man or X, Y, and Z. And the press does what it does best, is propaganda by omission. So it's incumbent upon us to make that fuss. That's what I'm saying. Parents to make the fuss in the classroom, and we as citizens to make as much as a fuss out in rallies and protests. Sorry, Bruce, back to you.
Yeah, well, it reminds what you were saying. It reminded me of what the great Russian author Alexander Solzhenitsyn said in his Harvard address. And this is way back in the 1978, I think. And essentially, he was talking about the decay of the West. Which is the West was decaying. There was the rumblings of the rise of the European state, the European Union, which was regarded as a kind of another Soviet kind of bloc, and now it's morphed into the global kind of idea. But he was saying that a curse that will afflict the West is the curse of this idea of human rights. Always human rights, and it'll create it'll create a victimhood. It'll create a lack, because people have no kind of have the responsibility of what people should do in society is erased. You only have your human right. I want what I want. There's not responsibility. So this white allyship and white indifference and all that, and the onus is on white people to build sustained partnerships. People have responsibility, whether you're black or white or whatever colour. But of course, so if you've got to raise responsibility for black and ethnic minority people, you just got to have them inculcated with, I have rights and I want them fulfilled, and that's it. And that's very dangerous. That creates a very dangerous society.
I agree, Bruce, and because human rights as a feeling and an emotion seems to supersede constitutionally protected rights. Your constitutionally protected rights. Sorry, a bit of feedback there, Bruce. Mute that for a minute.
Yeah. No,
it's constitutionally protected rights as opposed to human rights. Human motive.
Well, I think so. It's also need to went on also to say that the rule of law is fair enough for certain limits, but it's not enough when the moral fabric of society. And he was talking from a Christian perspective as well. When it's just the rule of law, it is a degenerate society, because look at the sort of laws like hate crime laws and all this sort of nonsense, and people rely on these laws to get at people, to take them to court, to report them. But of course, it raises agency and responsibility. And that life's not all about happiness and contentment. There is suffering and challenges in life. But the way you hear these woke politicians talking, it's all about rights. It's all about, we've got to make a new law. We've got to outlaw this and outlaw that. But there's no responsibility to be fearless speech. As Michel Foucault, the famous French philosopher, he said, a sign of a civilized society, and Foucault had his faults, but he was right on this point, that a civilized society is one where fearless speech is allowed to flourish, where you're able to offend people, You're able to have arguments and debates and fall out. Now, what we're being corralled into is a society where, if you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, you've got to be in court. You have a visit from the police. You're going to be done for a hate crime. That is a disastrous scenario we're in.
Daunting, yeah, very daunting. And we seem to be picking up a bit of feedback for some reason, Bruce. I don't know if you could mute the mic, but we'll come up close to it there. Yeah, can you just mute your speaker there for a second?
Aye. Hold on.
All right, perfect. It's just your speaker's pushing back there a little bit. Well, Bruce, like I say, we're coming up on the hour and a half, and again, the time just kind of just flies away with us again. Like I said, I wanted kind of the strategies again, just to have this information and to have these tables. I will, if you could be so kind, and I'll direct people to follow you over to your X account and post links. I'll post links as well to the two brochures or pamphlets that you popped out there. The anti-racism document from the Scottish Council of Deans and Education. Our Irish system will fall in line like with some of these. I have them up on the screen there as well. The Scottish Council for the Deans of Education as well. Go search that out over here. Katie Data, I know, and Mel will be on top of that straight away and start getting this sort of the language classing and the language used. Let's start informing ourselves on that. We can be more prepared for when it does start appearing here in the Republic. Also here, the University of West of Scotland's racism exists on our campuses and in our societies. And again, these platitudes, this sign-off message down towards the bottom there, Bruce, we stand united against racism, or we're proud to be. We stand against. You do empty platitudes each and every time, nothing effective, nothing substantive. Always empty platitudes and play on emotive, but the majority of people play along with it. Whatever it is, I don't know whether it's too heavily reliant on the government and their income is based on some sort of government that they won't push back or answer back. No sense of sole self-responsibility or agency for oneself to get up in the morning to dress yourself and get out and be a productive member of society. It's if you're a person of colour, it seems to be now, well, we'll give you every benefit, we'll give you the advantage. In fact, we'll discriminate against others so that you can get a perceived advantage. And this is a total nonsense. This is a precursor, as Stefan Molyneux said, in relation to cancelling. The cancelling of one form or another is a precursor to genocide. Would you agree?
It's how far did they go with the hatred, for example, the sort of anti-white hatred? Did they start removing people? Did they start stopping white people getting jobs? In Scotland, they made some policy pledge at, I think it was the Scottish National Party conference, about basically giving preference to black and ethnic minority people to get jobs. I mean, we've just through 3 years of COVID, people have lost their jobs, their businesses. And now they're turning around and saying, you know what? There's a cost of living crisis. People's lives have been destroyed. We're living in a 97% white country, but we've got to start prioritising black and ethnic minority people. I mean, you sometimes think they are pushing for a kind of sort of civil war or something, and war on the streets. I think that, and I think I think to myself, well, that would be very handy for them, because then they could bring in martial law. They could bring in more draconian rules. It's like everything they've done, they're trying to tweak, to poke, and to make society a most unpalatable place to be.
It's slow increments of turning the heat up on the frogs in the water, ever so slightly, so they become used to it more and more up until it's too late to get the boiling point. And that boiling point is what we're trying to reach off, or even as an accelerationist, Bruce, is to get them to turn up the heat too much too quickly so that the frogs learn to jump out. So if we can alert people to the different, not only the different strands of attack, as you say, people are being conditioned to to seek out a binary answer to every fucking problem. So this or that. There's no third way. There's no alternative. Like I said to you, I said in my last broadcast out there, and again, I'm very hyperbolic as per usual. I don't care about what's happening on the other side of the street. I keep prayers for the innocence and the loss of life. There's nothing that I can do and affecting a change over there to something that's been going on for thousands of years. Hasn't just happened in the last year. Hasn't just happened. And all the new, just straight out of universities and all that, they think that this is a recent situation that they can proffer a solution. And if we just all sit together and love, everybody just sits down, love is love. And if we, open our purse strings and give away our wealth and give away our rights, that everybody will learn to live in harmony. But what Antifa and what people are finding in the United States now and the UK, as Palestinians and queers for Palestine march alongside each other and get to have close contact with each other, is that what Antifa and the stupid loony left are beginning to firmly realise is that the people that they're trying to encourage to come here en masse will take over them, actually hate them. They're that stupid enough that they don't realise that the scorpions that they're bringing in won't change their immutable characteristics of being strongly, vehemently against homosexuality in any way, shape, or form. And their answer is not to castigate you, to ignore you. Their answer is to stone you or push for a death penalty. And with the amount of jihadi flags on the streets in London, when I'm talking ISIS flags, Al-Qaeda flags on prominent display, no pushback from police forces to make them criminalisation, they will begin to get the upper hand. And so, again, it's not about information, it's about supporting the parties. I'm talking about here in the Republic. I don't know what the story is, the situation is in Scotland in sort of representation, but we have a couple of good parties, prominent parties here now. If we can get them a couple of voices, even on the European stage, Michael Leahy, Diarmuid and Herman Kelly from the IFP are situated now. Not too sure about the National Party. Also, Ireland First, Derek Bly's organisation, I think they'll just be concentrating on councils, regional, local councils, and then the main general election, which I still fear will be called soon. A snap election will be cool, and we have to be